Hello everyone, Jason Meyer here, and today we are going to look at putting our four values and two edges into different sequences for form. We're going to look at a sphere, an opaque sphere, a transparent sphere, cups, flat, and then how we combine them. So I start with the Vine charcoal and I fill out the mass, the whole of the sphere. Notice I don't start by outlining it. In all these, we're going to pretend like the light's coming in from the top corner. We need a single light source for form. And then the back of, we can think of just the back side of parentheses there. And so this is going to be our shadow. And right now I'm just doing it with more solid Vine charcoal, a little heavier touch than when I started. Filling things out, and I like to do that because Vine charcoal is easy to wipe away and to get soft edges. Now I'm going to clear all that out from the lit part of the sphere versus the shadow part of the sphere, and then I can use one of my softening tools to soften up that edge between the light and the shadow. So our edge sequence is going to be when the sphere starts, there's going to be a hard edge. And as the sphere turns into shadow, it's a transition, so it's a soft edge. And as the sphere ends, there's another hard edge. So our edge sequence is going to be hard, soft, hard. Our highlight is going to be the area of focus. We need that on the inside, and that helps this have the three-dimensional look or make it into a sphere. In other words, from the sides, the middle is bulging towards us. Now with my Conte, I'm going to go in and with my number 4 value, really establish my shadow. Not going all the way to the edge, but letting some of that Vine charcoal step us into the light, again, for the effect of a soft edge. And then a cast shadow on the table, again, not going quite to the very edge to let the end of it have a little bit of a soft edge. We can come back with our Vine charcoal, which is our number 3 value, and put some background air in here. It doesn't need to be everywhere, but we can use it on the light side to make the light pop. We can use it where the light and the shadow meet so that we can open that edge so that the thing isn't totally closed in, but the air can get in and out. And again, I'm always checking to make sure that edge is soft. This edge is hard, so I'm just going to reinforce that a little bit. Notice I didn't go all the way around, but just on the leading edge. So as you do this, if you'll take the attitude of just playing with the value shapes, this is my background value shape, my air value shape, my number 3 value. When we get to full color, it'll be our gray value. Right, and I'm just checking my transitions and how this value meets, say, the light side of the sphere, how it meets between the shadow and the light. So it'll sneak into the sphere right there. And that's all there is to making a sphere. Let's take a look at transparency now and see how that compares with the sphere sequence. Again, I'm going to mass in a basic circle. It could be an oval if you want it or whatever, but we're just going to stick with that basic sphere today. And the main difference is that the light and the shadow of the sphere will be reversed. So the light side will be dark, and then the shadow side will be light, and the highlight will stay where it is. So with that in mind, I'm going to leave a little slice of the paper for the transparent. And basically what you're saying is that the light's hitting at the highlight, but then penetrating the surface of the object and showing up on the back end of it. And that's what makes it appear as transparent versus the opaque sphere we did before. The light hits the object and bounces off and doesn't make it to the back side of the object. So I'm going to take my eraser and cut a little place out so we can go ahead and put the highlight on. Again, the highlight's in the same spot because the light's coming from the same direction. So with the white Conte, little highlight spot. Then I'll take my dark Conte, or you can take your dark charcoal pencil, and where the light was above is now going to be dark, and the cast shadow will be the same. So notice I'm not being heavy-handed anytime I go to the edge. I don't try to do a singular line, but we want these things to be able to breathe a little bit. So this dark shape then is going to be basically a ball. We're going to want a little waxing moon sort of shape for the transparency. And so take your time, again, just engage with making the mark, trying to get the value even. Don't be in a hurry. But just how can you extend that value? And when you're trying these, if they don't turn out, don't panic. Remember, I've done a lot of these. And there's a lot, I know I'm making it look easy, but there's a lot of choices in here. And until you know how and why to make those choices, sometimes it doesn't always turn out. But in your effort to do this, it's going to give us some things to talk about and places where we can address misunderstandings. And that's where the learning is going to take place. But you need to engage and do these. You can understand it on an intellectual level, and yet when you get with the pencil or the materials in your hand, you can be stuck and not sure what to do. So again, all I'm doing is making our light side dark. The highlight stays in the same place. And then the back end of it is going to be light because the light's shining through that. And then with the Vine charcoal, our number 3 value, I can come down near the transparency and darken that a little bit so that the transparency shows up. And notice that where I do the background next to the dark, it just makes it a little bit of a softer step, not quite so harsh. And it's a good idea with your background to always try to hit it with your finger or the stump to keep those edges soft, kind of in a general way. And then inside your object where your dark meets your light, a lot of times it's helpful to run the stump or the chamois or your finger over that to just make sure it's kind of a lost edge. And then you can also use the stump and the chamois to flatten out the value. And then notice how I'm using it to adjust that highlight a little bit. So there's a lot of sensitivity that's available with these tools once you get used to them. So again, your main objective is just getting used to the material and seeing what it'll do. Now notice your eye's going to go towards white. So if I put it right underneath, that's going to be kind of extreme. But if I put a little white mark at the end of the shadow, you see how that pulls your eye? And then in front of, little mark there. And with that, we've got a little eye path. So that's transparency. The main difference between transparency and opaqueness is the light and the shadow are reversed. We still have hard edge, soft edge, hard edge, and the cast shadow and the highlight are the same. Let's take a look at a cup. Again, we're going to mask this thing in. General mask. We do it with the Vine charcoal because it's easy to wipe away. We can get darker, we can get lighter, but it's the easiest one to remove. I'm going to go ahead and put a little background already on here. I'm going to need that to see the front edge of that cup. So the value sequence for the light and the shadow is similar as transparency, except you're going to have a little light on the edge, the leading edge there on the outside. And we could, sometimes these finer things are harder to do, but we just want to wipe that away. Again, this is going to be the light inside the cup, so it hits the cup edge and then throws a shadow on the inside until it hits the far side of the cup. And the highlight would be right in the center and then right on that edge as well. So the inside, again, just think of a basic ball or parentheses. Sometimes it'll go into an oval. You can always rely on that parentheses idea. So again, opposite of the sphere. But unlike transparency, the highlights are in different spots. And again, the cast shadow will be the same. So this is a shadow being cast inside the cup to the far wall of the cup. And then there'll be a shadow on the table, which is the cast shadow from the cup onto the table. So again, making a nice even value because we're preparing for paint. And in paint, we want to think in mass, not line. So that's why we look for these big flat masses. And a hard edge where this ends. And in every object, I try to find ways to get in and out. And right between your dark and your light, between your dark and your shadow, that's a good place just to let the edge breathe a little bit if you can by adjusting the background so it works with it. So notice how by getting that third value on the background, it can highlight the light of the edge of the cup, and it can also soften the effect of the shadow if it's too harsh. So again, as you do this, just getting used to the material. Just getting used to the material. If you get too far off track, you can send it in for a private critique or show up at Morro Bay on the 1st or 3rd Monday, and we will give you lots of attention there. So cup is similar to transparency, but the highlight's a little bit different. And the light on the far edge is a little more intense with also edge on the leading edge. No highlight in the middle. So we've bulged towards us with the sphere and transparency. We've bulged away from us with the cup, and now what if we want to stay flat or parallel to us? Again, massing it in, and now with the parentheses idea, there's a very thin shadow on that far side for flat. So we could pretend like this is a leaf or something like that. Then all inside will be flat, same value. And then the highlight, again with that idea of parentheses, a little bit like the cup, but super thin, will just catch the edge there. And then we'll get rid of any air on the inside. And then we can take the vine charcoal for our third value and kind of use that to help us define the rest of this flat. I actually call this a circle, but it'd be like a leaf or a piece of paper or something like that. Something that doesn't really have that third dimension. And notice that by having the highlight on the edge, that kind of helps flatten things out too. Whereas when the highlight's in the middle of things, it gives it more form. And that's all there is to making flat. Once you have those four down and you're feeling brave, we try to put them all together. Let's start with just a big sphere right here. It could be an orange, it could be an apple. I'm not going to make it specific right now because again, this is just the idea of combining them. And then next to that sphere right there, you can think about having a cup. And what I'm actually drawing is the negative space in between them because that's going to be necessary for the clarity of the image. And on the other side, I'm going to have grapes overlapping. So again, I'm thinking about that negative shape on each side. And before I get started on the shadow of the big form, I want to make sure to leave a little bit of that light of the cup, but the shadow on the big form will help the light on the edge of that cup really sing. And then a highlight there because that's just a regular sphere. And then these will be little grapes and they're transparent, so the highlight's in the same spot. And then a little trick, I want you to look past these things. So on the other side of the shadow, put a little white there as well on the ground. So again, sometimes you got to slow down just a little bit if there's a hard edge, but we want to think about, again, transcending these objects with our value shapes. So the shadow on the sphere and the shadow on the grapes will just blend into one single number 4 value. And the same with the shadow on the sphere and the shadow on the cup. As you're doing this, don't be too afraid of mistakes. You got your eraser there. The most important thing is to try to be clear on your thinking. And for most of us, this is quite a different way of thinking and being. And again, try to be more concerned with the shapes of the dark marks and the shape of the light marks and how the light marks meet the dark marks, rather than the object you're drawing. Again, it's pretty easy to throw these values around so that they do certain things, but it's not so easy making real interesting shapes out of these values. So as you're learning to do this, one of the things I'm hoping that happens is that you get familiar with looking at these things more in terms of a number 4 value and the overall shape that makes, regardless of the objects that are involved. Whether it's a portrait, a head, an eye, and a nose, and a moat, or a still life, an apple and some grapes, a landscape, water and trees and clouds. Whatever it is, the game is still the same game. It's making a visual image that people want to look at. And the idea is the simpler we can be and the simpler these concepts we can work with, then as we get into our paint and our different materials, kind of the wilder we can get with that, in a sense, the freer we can be. If that's what you're into it, or you can be very controlled. But with these basic principles, it allows you to execute in any manner you want to. Rather than just copying, you're engaged in a different kind of activity. You're just creating a big visual puzzle that the viewer will enjoy unwinding. And don't aim just to finish, because really the joy is in, and the beauty is in how well these things are done. And the sophistication with which these shapes and values and edges can be made is kind of a non-ending quest. So if you'll fall in love with the process of just doing it and watching these things happen, rather than it's a task to be done, I think that's a much better relationship, and you'll get a lot more joy out of this. Because if you're too result-oriented, some of these tasks can be a little frustrating if they don't turn out. So that's the idea. So you know how to prepare your material. You've got some things to practice, and when you feel like you have those down, you can put them all together and get a beautiful little image. So I hope to see you and your work around real soon. For now, this is Jason Meyer, signing off.